Great. Okay. Thanks for having me, Troy. Thanks for having me here, and thank you everyone who is interested and has come. I appreciate the interest. This is my first outing outside of. I was born in a UFO group out here in Vancouver, BC, Canada, and this is my first outing outside, doing a public presentation away from that group. So I definitely appreciate the interest. Okay, so my screen share is up. Okay, one sec here. Okay, so again, thank you for having me here at SUFON. I'm actually think it's really cool. You guys are just down south and very close to me, and yeah, I can actually see Mount Baker from here, from my place, and so yeah, very cool. You guys are so close, and so I'm happy to do a presentation for you guys. A lot of the contact events are very local, and so they're not too far from you guys at all. This year was the Elder, the main alien that I ended up dealing with practically throughout most of my young adult life and into adult life. She was a gray alien, and or like what we call a gray alien. She had a very distinct chin, and she had a cone head that kind of went back, and she was about 4 feet tall, and she appeared to ooze or promote herself or promote a chief-like kind of vibration. So she seemed to be some kind of leader in her society in some way. And but nonetheless, she was there since 16 all the way to the 2016 contact event. So 1993 to 2016, I saw her the majority of the time, though it did interact with other aliens every now and then. So so welcome. Today's presentation, why should you trust me, right? No one should be trusting no one should be trusting a person who just says and does what I'm doing. So you shouldn't just trust me, and I put everything out as much as I can to be as authentic as I possibly can, so you can make your own choice. So I have a bit of a spiel about that here. Disclosure is setting the stage for my story. So there's been some leaks, whether it's Lou Elizondo or John Ramirez, some things that, and there's a picture forming as we're getting disclosure, and that picture is matching my story. So I'll help with kind of putting some of those pieces there. There's the overview of my story, and there are two themes that kind of run throughout my content. A theme of human enlightenment, which I think has to go pair in pair with the stuff they talk about the future. I don't think if you separate out the kind of consciousness topic away from their explanation about the future, then what they're talking about with the future looks terrifying for humans. But if you understand where they sit, then you understand what they're doing. So both things are required to understand them. And so I'll talk about those. And then at the end, I would be happy to do a Q&A, and we can all talk, and I can get to know you, and you can ask questions. So the why should you trust me, right? So I am I guess it's not unique from what I'm understanding. There is people like me out there who don't have any clue about their alien contact until midlife. Not even an inkling that I was having alien contact. And then by the age of 41, in fact, the day was July 1st, 2019, at the age of 41, I kind of went to the location of a screen memory, suspecting something was up because I was having UFOs flying around my house and having paranormal events. And eventually I started doing research on people who had been abducted by aliens. And I started to get it that this was very serious. And then when I went to the location of a screen memory, I could distinctly feel something had happened in that location that was not my normal memory, confirming for me that something else outside of my memory had been happening to me. And I could feel it very clearly that something had occurred to me. So I was a normal guy, I'd like to think of, a guy who was not into this topic. I did not explore it. I did not touch it. 20 years of my life, I really kept my hands off of the UFO and alien topic. though I was reading Whitley Strieber's books as a teenager, it really kind of ended there. I wasn't even studying the topic. I wasn't researching it. I was just casually into it, like it was sci-fi almost. Though I did believe Whitley Strieber's accounts, I kind of just ended it there. I didn't really explore it in any other way. And so I led a relatively normal life, only to have my memories come out midlife. I have had strange events all my life, which I didn't know were common actually for contactees, including a plethora of strange paranormal stuff that was happening right up to the moment I realized I had alien contact. I'd been seeing objects in the sky. People in my life had seen them with me, and I did have biological markings and strange things occurring at certain times that were, now I can see that were related to contact events. And my entire story, the Rising, thank you, Troy, for kind of pointing it out, centers around the Rising itself is a consciousness event that happened to me when I was 20 years old, and it traumatized me. It was really, really extreme, and it altered me. And it was just this mystery for the rest of my life. I had no idea what created it, and I didn't understand it. And it turned out it was tied to alien contact. So I did have this kind of weird background that I kind of just tried to bury and forget and live out a normal life. And then it all kind of comes to head at the age of 41. So you should be aware that I'm the type of person who wouldn't want to believe me either. So therefore, my whole process is transparency. So on my website, jeffselver.com, I have videos of UFOs, things that I've been seeing flying around the apartment that were, the moments I was able to film them were all very tied to parts of writing the book, times where either I was sharing the book with people or I was struggling with content within the book, and then there'd be a sighting and it'd be kind of like a message. It was really wild. I also have a polygraph there for those who really require that, which I would have as well too. And I also have a YouTube channel, and on my YouTube channel, I have even more detail about the level of memory that I have, and going into science about that. And I'll talk about that in a second here. Ian Halling, who works with Linda Moulton Howe. So he is, you can hear him on Linda's Earth Files YouTube channel. So he speaks. He's the kind of the sexy British accent in the background. And he's been following me since day one. The day I went public, July 5th, 2020, I did my first presentation. He synchronistically showed up, and he followed me ever since day one. And he's been kind of watching my story and been able to, corroborate when things matched with his research. And so it's very, very powerful. And you can see him speaking on my YouTube channel at my book launch video. So I have a video for my book launch. At minute 41, he's speaking, and he says a really beautiful thing about me. His huge amount of detail and recall of some 26 interactions with abduction events puts him in the highest category of UFO contactees. So very blessed to have Ian kind of in the background with me during this process. On my Jeff Selver YouTube channel, I have a video about how I have the level of memory that I do. Using the science of how memories are formed in my brain, my memory recall is supported by science. So I journaled this period of my life that I was having alien contact. It was basically repeating and embedding the synapses that contain the memory. So when you have a memory of an event and you journal it and you write it down, you're repeating it and you're structuring the memory, which I did at the time. Plus I was recording music. So I was documenting my emotional state, all stuff I went back into to get them to understand who I was at the time of these alien contact events. The majority of my contact events are outside, also very unique. So visual memories are easier to recall. So I'd be having a contact event on a hiking trail, and then I went out and found that location, and it would jar the memories and help me reconstruct what occurred to me. Also, sensations of the environment support greater recall. So there's moments where I'm with the elder, the Grey Alien, and I'm having a contact event on Hornby Island here in BC, and it's on a beach in the middle of the night, and the waves are crashing and the wind is blowing, and so it all supported my memory recall because it buried the conversation we had, and so I was easily able to kind of bring those memories back up. And so my process was at the age of 41, over months, flashback after flashback after flashback started to kind of unravel itself. And it kind of did it in this very a narrative. Like it kind of started from the 16-year-old, and then all of a sudden, and I thought, okay, that's the only contact event I had was when I was 16, and then all of a sudden, all the other flashbacks start opening up, and they opened it up kind of relatively in order, and that started to blow me away. What I did hypnotic regression on the flashbacks. So it wasn't like I was just kind of thinking I had alien contact and went and did hypnotic regression. The regression showed me how it started and then how it ended, and it slotted in the flashbacks in perfect order. So, and I know a lot of people in the field don't like hypnotic regression, but I kind of argue that I proved to myself its validity and its effectiveness. So I have John Mack's quote here. The validity of information obtained under hypnosis has been a source of controversy in both the psychiatric and the UFO communities. Nevertheless, it is my impression that data obtained through hypnosis in abduction cases is often more reliable because it comes without the conscious mind's distorting efforts to provide reasonable, coherent narratives. Now, the point to make here is the word narrative, because of course, with hypnotic regression, people can definitely confabulate. But that's typically in one contact event. The idea that a person like myself can create an entire narrative of 26 contact events in the subconscious regression state, I basically say is impossible. That cannot happen. And for me, I have the elder mentioning something that was talked about 4 contact events ago, or vice versa, where I'm upset about something that happened 10 contact events ago. So there's this narrative that my subconscious could never just produce like this. It doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. And it's obvious to me because everything was very real for me. So how I proved my hypnotic regressions were accurate and therefore real events. So I went to the outdoor locations of my contact events and got small details of the environment right that my conscious mind had long forgotten. I have videos of me doing that on my YouTube channel. Hypnotic content had plenty that is common in alien abduction contact that I had no knowledge about. I tested myself by doing hypnotic regressions twice, months up to a years apart. So I had this order with which I just followed, and then I needed to go back and do more regressions on them. And I just went back to number 1 and then started all over again. And I didn't read the transcript. So I was testing myself with what was actually memories. Plus, the beings did things twice that allowed me to confirm exactly what I experienced. So my brain does not have the capacity to make up these things, like seeing my thoughts on a computer. So if I saw them the first time in the regression, I would think, maybe my mind's confusing something. But then to see them a second time confirms, in another contact event, confirms that these are exactly what I saw. And my brain has never produced this feeling in itself. The thought, seeing my thought, which I could see was the thought I just had that day, and it's sitting there on a computer screen. These are things my brain has no ability to make up. So there was tons and tons of, reconfirming content that happened to me that showed that, of course, this happened to me, and of course, I'm dead set that this happened to me, and the memory of every contact event. And I mentioned this before. Started with detailed flashbacks. The regressions were simply used to understand the flow of events of those flashbacks. And lastly, for those who are critical of using hypnotic regression, you should just try it yourself, because I find so many people making judgments about something they don't know anything about. And so here's my recommendation for those skeptics who don't believe in hypnotic regression. Meditate yourself for 15 minutes. And at the end, you can give a command to your brain, your subconscious, and think of a memory. Maybe pull up something when you were 16 years old, maybe say a birthday or an event. And then tell your subconscious, when I count down to 20, I'm going to remember the full details of that day. Then count down 20, 0, 20, visualizing yourself stepping at every number and the feeling of going deep into your subconscious. And what you'll find in a real successful hypnotic regression is that you pull out memories of things that were buried in your own mind. So you would see, a poster on the wall that you forgot you had, or you'd see the shoes you wore as a 16-year-old, or the hat you wore as a 16-year-old, or you would internalize the feeling of the friend that you copied. Remember, as a teenager, we copy people that we know, and so you'd have those memories would come out of you in a real regression. So you can prove to yourself that the brain does actually store real memories in a subconscious fashion, and that's what I use to prove to myself I was my 19-year-old self in these memories, or I was my 17-year-old self in these memories, and the moments of those of that era came back to my mind when I was in those regressions. So that's the best I can do for the why you should trust me. And I do it again because the content that I talk about is heavy, and it's what the stuff they told me seems very, very important for people to know. Just going to grab a sip of water. Okay. So the process of disclosure, especially over the last couple of months, has supported and corroborated the story the beings gave me. So I'm just going to do a bit of a brief recap of some disclosure tying into my story here. So on April 27th, 2020, the U.S. Department of Defense formally released 3 Navy videos that contain unidentified aerial phenomena. On June 25th, 2021, the Pentagon released the UAP Task Force report admitting that there have been unexplained encounters between the U.S. military and mysterious objects. The report admits the encounters could be previously unknown aircraft from China, Russia, or even a non-government terror group. On November 10th, 2021, Avril Haines, the Director of National Intelligence, the executive head of the United States Intelligence Committee, i.e. the chief spy, speaking at the Our Future in Space event at the Washington National Cathedral, was asked about UAPs. She admitted there remains things about the strange encounters which the intelligence community simply does not understand. Always, there's also the question of, is there something else that we simply do not understand, which might come extraterrestrially? The next day, there was a headline: Alien bombshell, UFOs buzzing US warships may be aliens, as encounters show something we don't understand, says America's top spy chief. I reiterate that I think most people missed this. On February 5th, 2022, Chris Mellon, the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, spoke to the Daily News web series Rising, which was a morning talk show, and said, based on what we know about UAPs, aliens are the best explanation. So UFO, then there was another headline, UFO expert Chris Mellon, based on what we know about UAPs, aliens are the best explanation. So to back up just a little bit, so most people in this field now know Lou Elizondo, who ran the UAP program funded by Congress that was part of the Pentagon's research into UFOs, this kind of hidden program. Well, he was the guy running it. So Lou, typically in media, when he's in kind of bigger named programs like CNN or CBC here in Canada, he kind of just opens the doors about studying UFOs and trying to take them seriously. But when he's on these podcasts or these kind of lower, more quieter or less of a larger audience than the kind of more major news stations, he lets on to more content that he knows about. So on Theories of Everything with Kurt Jaimangal, on October 21st, 2021, in a previous interview, he explained the information would be sombering to the public. So he said in some previous interview that, when the public learns about it, it's going to be sombering. The interviewer asked him to expand on this. So what he said is very interesting. Imagine everything you've been taught, whether it's through Sunday school or through regular formal education in school, or what our political leaders have told us, and yes, maybe our mothers and fathers around the dinner table have told us, or maybe at bedtime, about who we are, our background and our past. What if all of that appeared to not be entirely accurate? In fact, the very history of our species, the meaning, what it means to be a human being, and our place in this universe. What if all of that is now in question? What if it turns out a lot of the things that we thought were one way aren't? Are we prepared to have that honest question with ourselves? Are we prepared to recognize we are not at the top of the food chain potentially? That we are not the alpha predator? Maybe somewhere in the middle? There's a point in the conversation where we will have to do lots of reconciling with ourselves. Are we going to find ourselves in a place where history will have to be rewritten? So that matches information the beings tell me about the history of the human species. So to add to this, on December 3rd, 2021, John Ramirez was interviewed by the Unidentified Celebrity Review. John Ramirez served in the CIA from 1984 to 2009. At the CIA, he was an intelligence analyst in the Chief Electronic Intelligence Analyst Branch, specializing in ballistic missile defense weapon systems, radars, and technical collection operations. John is a U.S. Navy veteran in the electronic warfare technicians field, and he claims to be an experiencer, having contact events as a child. John Ramirez says he was part of a CIA presentation in which, after World War II, the CIA has been aware that humans are in fact alien hybrids, and that certain genetic lines have greater augmentations than others. After World War II, they discovered that humans are hybrids. We are all hybrids. Some are more hybridized than others. They told us that they know there are certain families, genetic lines, that have been hybridized to a greater extent than others. When pressed, he said, somebody told us. So as in, somebody told them, and they were presenting that information to him. And they asked him, how do you know that they weren't lying to you? And he said, well, within the CIA, they don't lie to each other. And then on top of it, he knew who these people were who were presenting this information and knew they had greater access to more higher up information. So he says, I am very confident the government is sitting on this. And in order to understand the UAP in its entirety, where it came from, why they're here, who's driving them, you have to go back to, like, what's our role? Why are they talking to us? Why do they want to interact with us? You have got to build that bridge to the fact that we are hybrids, and we may have been hybridized by them, and they themselves may be hybrids, in order to get back to the true story and why it's so secret. If President Biden all of a sudden says we're all alien hybrids, the stock market would plunge. We have to have this controlled dissemination, a little at a time. We already know about the craft. Okay, there's things in the air, great. And now for the first time, somebody in the position of authority, like the DNI, Avril Haines, said there is an extraterrestrial component to this. That's the second thing that needs to be talked about, and go from there. So I have two contact events in which the beings imply contact with human leadership was made in the 40s and the 50s. And humans made a choice that affected how the next decades would play out between the two species. I personally lean towards a President Eisenhower meeting with Grey Aliens in 1954, though they never said that to me directly. That research can be found in an essay on my website. On jeffselver.com, I have essays, and you can see that one of them was dedicated towards discovering how do we really know that this is in the mythology of the UFO field, right? And how do we really know what occurred? And when you look at all the actual research, the whistleblowers coming out left, right, and center, it looks like something actually did occur. And each whistleblower kind of adds pieces to the puzzle. But the most important point about it is that the information we have around this possible Eisenhower meeting sets the stage for my story. So according to William Cooper, these humanoid aliens, not gray aliens at the time, had come down and said, you need to change your ways. So the humanoids refused to exchange technology, citing that we were spiritually unable to handle the technology we then possessed. They believed that we would use any new technology to destroy each other. He continued, this race stated that we were on a path of self-destruction, and we must stop killing each other, stop polluting the earth, stop raping the earth's natural resources, and learn to live in harmony. So as a contactee, my favorite part is sometimes going back to this stuff and looking at what people missed. And I think people missed something about Gerald White's letter. So Gerald White was someone who was apparently there that night, at the night of the alien contact. And he wrote a letter to Meade Lynn. And that letter is available on a website, and you can see that resource. And I have a link to it on my essay there. So this letter is very, very intriguing and explains something that most people, I think, missed. So Gerald White, who was there that night, documented his experience in a letter to Meade Lynn. The reality of the other plane aeroforms is now and forever removed from the realms of speculation and made a rather painful part of the consciousness of every responsible scientific and political group. In some instance, I could not stifle a wave of pity that arose in my own being as I watched the pathetic bewilderment of rather brilliant brains struggling to make some sort of rational explanation which would enable them to retain their familiar theories and concepts. And I thanked my own destiny for having long ago pushed me into the metaphysical woods and compelled me to find my way out. I had forgotten how commonplace things as dematerialization of solid objects had become to my own mind. The coming and going of an etheric or spirit body has been so familiar to me these many years, I had forgotten that such a manifestation could snap the mental balance of a man not so conditioned. I shall never forget those 48 hours at Muroc. So that's Edwards Air Force Base. So what those say to me is the beings demonstrated their spiritual, their consciousness abilities to these, military and Pentagon officials. That's exactly what this looks like. Most people discarded these words when you see William Cooper and why other people discarded them, because apparently Gerald White, believed in out-of-body experiences. So he's a nutcase, and that's kind of how they framed it. But, in this day and age, you can almost get scientific evidence for some of these type of out-of-body experiences. So there's something that people kind of pushed aside about this content. And for me, it speaks a lot, because a lot of contactees have seen the beings turn into orbs. I've seen that. The beings have also been able to take out their ethereal form and put it into another's body. I've seen that as well too. And I know other contactees have seen these things. Also, the contactees have seen the beings manipulate matter, literally turn matter into things. So the idea that they did this is for me, very real, that they demonstrated their kind of consciousness abilities. Gerald White described the atmosphere of the meeting. I have never seen so many human beings in a state of complete collapse and confusion as they realized that their own world had indeed ended with such finality as to beggar description. That is the response of people who would see something paranormal and flip them out, versus just meeting, Star Trek aliens or Star Wars aliens, right? This is the response of people whose psyches were shocked by what they had witnessed. And so I think that's a big piece of the puzzle here. So William Cooper wrote, these terms were met with extreme suspicion, especially the major condition of nuclear disarmament. It was believed that meeting that condition would leave us helpless in the face of an obvious alien threat. We also had nothing in history to help with the decision. Nuclear disarmament was not considered to be within the best interest of the United States. The overtures were rejected. Okay, so crop circles. We know the aliens are here. They're here. We got the DNI admitting it. We got Chris Mellon admitting it. That kind of looks like there's aliens here. Well, some of these crop circles are unprecedented, and some of them have left messages. And we should be taking these messages seriously now, because again, they all add to a picture that's in my story. On August 21st, 2001, a crop circle appeared in Hampshire, UK. It was a reply to the original 1974 Arecibo message, which was an interstellar radio message sent in binary. The original message provided details of our species, including our DNA structure. The crop circle appeared to be a reply from Grey aliens, providing DNA information about their species, but it also showed that beings can communicate in binary. James Deardroff, a former senior scientist at the National Scientist Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, Colorado, did a detailed statistical analysis on this probability that this crop circle had been done by humans. The results of which can be seen on a web page at infoquest.org, which analyzed the crop circle in detail. After taking into account the crop circle designer to properly understand the binary code the original message was sent in, the knowledge to change only specific details that would require knowledge of DNA and chemistry, the unprecedented detail of the crop circle formed completely from roughly 1,000 right angles in small quarters with no errors made, the amount of people required in the dark to complete it. It was filmed by a CTV camera, by the way, that field, and there was no light, and there left no markers on the ground for measuring devices, poles, or footprints. He concluded that it would be less than 1 in 5 billion chances humans made this crop circle. So what seems to me is that the beings demonstrated, hey, we can read your binary and we have no problem translating it. But the next year, they provide a really powerful message in binary in a crop circle that is unprecedented. Right on August 15th, 2002, in a field of wheat in Crabwood, Winchester, UK, a crop circle appeared. It was hundreds of feet long. It was precisely executed with no apparent errors. Look at the horizontal lines. This level and scale of detail has never been repeated once or again. It's never been, no one, you'd have to visually demonstrate. You can practice this even in fields before you could even try to attempt to fool people. So the whole setup is just absolutely unprecedented. Never mind the binary code that the disk is in, right? So researcher Paul Vigay discovered the disk being held by the Grey is an ASC2 binary code. And when translated, it says, "Beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain, but still time. Believe there is good out there. We oppose deception, conduit closing." Doesn't matter how you interpret this. The most important parts are there is a warning going on here. Gray aliens are synonymous with warning humans. And a lot of contactees, right? Whitley Strieber was warned about the future. We're constantly warned and warned and warned about the future. It doesn't matter how you flip this, doesn't matter which way you take it. We are being warned by aliens about the future. So lastly, this is before we start moving into my book, this is my last slide here. So Linda Moulton Howe's May 12th, 2021 Earth Files episode. By the way, at this point, I had drafts of my book out and I was doing presentations that had already said what you're about to hear. So Dr. John Brandenburg, the chief of astronautics and theoretical plasma physicist at Kepler's Aerospace Limited. So his corporation, he's the chief, by the way, his corporation sends the software to Kepler satellite. So he worked on government projects and space intelligence, wrote a book called Morningstar Pass, The Collapse of the UFO Cover-Up. Absolute secrecy creates absolute power. Dr. Brandenburg reminded us of Haim Eshed, the ex-Israeli Minister of Defense, claiming that the US government had secret agreements with aliens. Dr. Brandenburg exclaimed that the one group that we were dealing with are the Greys. He said the Greys have a long-standing interest. They want Earth. That's why they're making hybrids. Hybrids can live on Earth. It's a complex kind of relationship, and it hasn't gone very well. This was first discussed by John Lear, who had close contact with intel agencies, who said the arrangement with one group of aliens had gone very badly. So here's my story. That was the big warm-up, so thank you for bearing with that. The premise of my story is to get ready for a gray alien presence on planet Earth. That is what they tell me at the end when they basically tell me to open up my memories and write a book. They tell me to write a book. The whole premise being saying, tell them we're coming is really what it is. And it really is a story about gray aliens and them eventually telling me to get humans ready for a gray alien presence on planet Earth. So, and the beings do choose people to write a book. Whitley Strieber was chosen to write a book. Susie Hansen was chosen to write a book. And Susie Hansen expands on that, where she is told that she calls them communicators. So there's this kind of mission that we have to get this information out there, and we have a very specific mission and to kind of get it out. And I fully identify with that. That was something they told me to turn it into a book. And then I end up having all this ability to kind of talk about it publicly. So in my contact event, they also show me that same contact event where they tell me to turn it into a book. They show me that they are aware of every single person who publicly communicates about them or writes a book about them. Their eyes are on humanity and they are very aware of everything. By the way, so I am trying to be as grounded about this topic as possible. And I am not predicting the future and I'm not a prophet. I'm simply telling the message that they told me. But when I look at all the facts, it's kind of looking like it adds up. But again, I don't really know. I don't know if this is symbolic. I don't know if it's some kind of version of this, or it's exactly as they told it to me. I don't know. And you really, in the end, are the only one who has to make up the choice about what's really going on here, because I'm only supposed to tell the message, and then you make up your own mind about it. So in my book, I really leave it up to the reader to make up their own mind. So my story is 26 contact events told in detail from 1993 to 2017. And it really is the idea that the beings just kind of gave me open access to the entire memory set. And it just kind of came back and came back and came back. The story centers itself around the ideas of removal from society to discover one's soul. This really is the Into the Wild. For those who are aware of Christopher McCandless, right? There was a book called Into the Wild, and then there was a movie called Into the Wild. And that's really what my story is, right? I had this kind of wanderlust, the rising that occurred to me, the consciousness event, was a message also to abandon my life. And then I ended up having alien contact events throughout it. And that's really what the center of my story is this kind of spiritual mission while having alien contact events. It's really wild. So the premise of my story, there seems to be two major themes throughout the entire story. Human enlightenment is the beginning of understanding these beings. The beings are highly, highly benevolent, and their concerns and perspectives are of a higher order. They do not think like humans do, and they are interested in preserving and caring, and then watching us kind of fumble about as we damage things around us and damage the planet. But so the beings gave me this consciousness experience, my first contact event, the White Room. They build up the rising. Then the rising is this kind of, attainment thing, but it's so extreme, it traumatizes me. I end up trying to hold it or balance it, have trouble with that while traveling. And then I end up with a Vedic master. And they do explain that they're aware that I was going to meet him. So they kind of are able to see my timeline, if you will. So that's why they gave me this kind of extreme event, because they knew, well, whatever we give him, he'll be able to kind of recover from it or heal from it, I guess. That's maybe how they thought about it. But what it shows, just doing that, making that my story, shows that their interest and mastery over human ideas of enlightenment. And then the second theme throughout my story is that they plan to make their presence known on planet Earth. The purpose of the hybrids is to put them on Earth, and that they are not taking over, but plan to work with us, share their consciousness technology, and influence us away from no wars and no destruction of nature. Okay, so we're going to spread out into the two themes here. I'm going to just delve into the theme of human enlightenment. When I do the theme of the planetary content, I'll be giving contact events. I'll show you some drawings about contact events that I had. But I think it's so important. It's so easy for people to take the planet stuff out of context from the fact that the beings are high-level beings. If you do, then it looks terrifying. Is what it really does. Just look terrifying. And I'm convinced it's not terrifying. And you have to know that this side is part of the whole picture. So in my experience, the beings are very aware we are stuck in a paradigm. They are very interested in breaking our minds, of changing our paradigm, which requires opening oneself up to new ways of thinking, of changing our frame of reference of reality. We have to break out of our own matrix. So every contact event, I'm constantly pushed to break my own brain. The rising alone was something that was just so awkward and bizarre to my brain. They're constantly about changing the way I think about things, changing my frame of reference of reality. And when I look up other people's contact events, or I look at a UFO sighting, that's exactly what I see going on. There was a really fun, I think it's the History Channel that did the Lou Elizondo coming out, and that first series they did in the History Channel. I forget the name of that series, but there's a really funny sighting where the military guy is looking at a star constellation, and he's like, what this constellation that's not a constellation. He's like looking at all these stars, and that doesn't make sense. He's looking at it with a telescope, and there's this star constellation that shouldn't be in the sky. And then all of a sudden the entire star constellation twists and turns. All the objects that are making up the stars all twist, and each one goes out by themselves. I look at that and I think, they're breaking his mind. They're aware he's observing, and they're trying to make him shatter his brain about what's going on here. Like the nature of reality gets twisted up for him. And they do those kind of things on purpose. They twist up your brain. They push the context because we're stuck. Human beings have a perception of our reality, and we need to expand it and open these ideas up. So in my story, the beings influence interact with or display their understanding of the afterlife and the process of incarnation. So not just this idea of this airy-fairy that they're kind of in the afterlife in a spirit form. In my contact event, the beings are in corporal form as gray aliens in the afterlife realm, whatever that realm is, whatever happens in that space, gray aliens have an ability to be in that space. And then on top of it, they have their own science about everything. They have this kind of brainy application about everything. And they demonstrate in my contact events an understanding about the process of incarnation, that, the higher self, if you will, makes plans to incarnate a body, being you and all of us, into the physical realm. And the gray aliens have a scientific understanding of that process about the life being built. And they display that information in my contact event. They fully understood. They got very interested in me having a past life awareness, and they studied that stuff from inside. Anyway, they studied that stuff from the inside. As I mentioned, they had my thoughts on a computer. They were able to study me discovering my past life awareness, and they watched that process from the inside. And this is fairly well documented now, it seems. The beings have a very detailed understanding about time, and they display this all throughout my contact events, knowing what's about to happen, what's about to occur, and they constantly refer to what's around the corner, what's coming. But I think that all these are tied together. So it does seem that contactees do display, at least it seems to me, most experiences I witness, there's always some kind of synchronicity going on in their life, whether it's the type of people they're supposed to meet when they're having alien contact, or how they discover the alien contact is a synchronicity. It's a kind of some kind of weird book that gets put in their hands, or a person that leads them down the path of, opening up this awareness to their lives. It's this kind of understanding about the nature of reality. And this is what I think is going on, is that the beings have an expanded view of time, that their experience of time is larger, and that is the realm of intuition, synchronicities, and the ability to vision, which gets demonstrated in my contact events, that the power of thought, being, and feeling to change the universe is visioning. And I display an understanding of that in my contact event, or while I'm having contact events. The beings seem to be very aware that I'm doing that, and they seem to like it, and it seems to be part of this whole process. And so they display this kind of like interest in watching this process. And so regardless, their level of mastery far exceeds what we can even comprehend here. And I'm certain that we're dealing with an expansion of time. And so for us, intuition, synchronicities, and visioning all kind of have these effects. They all kind of seem like there's these separate things, but for them, I'm assuming that they kind of live in this larger expanded view of time, and they can see it all happening, and they can see what's about to occur. So anyway, it's very fascinating, and the beings display these kind of understandings in my story. There is an overarching premise to my story that is really about the self-finding godhood. So there is a God, and a unity is truth. That's what my story does come down to. An aware field, and when I say God, I have no religious background, so I say an aware field of consciousness that permeates all existence. We are God. So the higher self, we all have a higher self. This is something the beings show me, and we all have a higher self, and the higher self is this, this offshoot of self, and so it's the one controlling all the lives that manifest on planet Earth. And the beings are the ones who interacted with that guy, not me. They interacted with that thing. And so we are an offshoot of that. And that's the God self. Whenever you worship God, or you bring God into your heart, you're bringing that guy, the higher self, into your consciousness. And this was all demonstrated in these contact events. So we have the power to affect the universe through visioning. And that's one of the core points here, that we have a God power within us. And the beings also were very, very interested in this period. In the traveling years, this is what it was all about. And the beings were very interested in this. Through raising our energy, communicating the end result of what we want through feeling, being, and thought, in our imagination, the universe literally responds. So just to give a piece of the consciousness stuff that I ended up having from them, that gets translated to the Vedic philosophy that I now follow. I invite people to meditate on Tattvamasi. So you breathe in through your nose, whatever meditation you do, if you do a meditation, but even you can do this meditation anytime, anywhere. Tatavam Ashi. What it means is that thou art. Consciousness is everything. Consciousness is permeating all things. Tatavam Ashi. Tatavam Ashi. So I recommend people do that meditation. So lastly, for this whole spiritual content, sorry, my nose is itchy. When we deal with spirituality, I see very often people call it the woohoo. It gets labeled this woohoo label. And I can understand that, I really can. But I approached my own spirituality with this, and especially in the story, with this kind of Carl Jung, self-analytical, self-discovery, self-knowledge kind of method, as opposed to just believing things. I wasn't believing that there was an afterlife. I experienced these things. I proved them for myself. It's called subjective proof. And you can subjectively prove things to yourself. And so my whole premise and my whole premise here is don't believe anything, experience it. I'm not telling you to believe in the afterlife. I'm telling you that, hey, I'm saying there is an afterlife, and then I recommend you go and make your life about finding that out for yourself, making it an experience, making it a truth for yourself. So my whole premise is don't believe in anything, experience it. And that's how I approach spirituality throughout my book, was seeking experiences to validate what I intuitively ended up knowing.